Everybody, my name is Ted Forbes and welcome back to another episode of The Art of Photography. And today our subject is getting better as a photographer. Seems kind of an obvious thing for us to cover here. I started this podcast back in 2008 and really this is the whole point of the show, is ways that you can improve your skill set and what you do as a photographer and your own creative output. This topic, I want to note, was inspired by a recent Flickr thread. Somebody in the Flickr group had made a posting asking for recommended literature on photography, books, that kind of thing. And the discussion ensued, and people were throwing back and forth, the whole 10,000 hour concept, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the question was, are books enough to really help you get better as a photographer? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that, but I thought this would be interesting to revisit today and talk about some things we've kind of mentioned before, but go into a little more depth and really get down to the heart of what would make you a better photographer. What is it that you need to work on? What do you need to improve on? And I think this is a little bit different for everybody. And the reason I say that is because, we're all different. Photography encompasses a wide range of things. It covers, the art side of things. There's a science side to it. There's a physics side to it. There's a chemistry side to it. So, you have four things right there. And I think these are the things that are, what are outstanding and fascinating about photography for me, is that it encompasses such a wide range of stuff. So anyway, what we're going to do today is I want to talk to you, about my ethos, how I think it's best to improve, and some things you can do to start getting better. Okay, so when talking about how to improve as a photographer, I like to define this, and I made some notes here, into four basic areas: definition, research, practice, and evaluation. So let's talk about those. Definition, research, practice, evaluation. You can tell I'm a former college teacher. But anyway, I think it's important to look at each one of these to kind of determine in an analytical way what it is that you want to do as a photographer. So by definition, I think it starts with trying to figure out what is it that appeals to you as a photographer about photography? What is it that drew you to it in the first place? And I think that there's many answers here, because remember I said photography, basically it involves art, it involves chemistry, it involves science, and it involves philosophy, it involves being able to tell a story. There's a number of things that define photography and talk about what that is. And so I think it's important to define for you personally, what is it that drew it to you in the first place? Do you like the technical side of it? Do you like the chemical processing if you're into film? Do you like digital processing? Do you like the art side of it? Do you like a combination of these things? Are you a storyteller? And so trying to define what it is that you're trying to get better at is very important, I think, in terms of moving forward. I think the second thing, if we look at, that's definition, if we look at research, I think this is where books can come in extremely handy to people. And research is going to involve basically two sides. I know we're getting really spread out. But anyway, when researching, I think it's important to understand that there's going to be research that you do on your own, and I think there's going to be research that you do getting feedback from other people, and this is really important. I think this is a thing that a lot of people miss, not just photography, but anything they're trying to learn. One of the things you can do, obviously, there's books you can look at, there's websites, there's all kinds of stuff online you can research, you can read your camera manual, you can find, there's all these documentation kind of things out there that you can go immerse yourself in. And those are all great. If you don't know the information, they're very handy to have. There are a lot of books on art theory and composition. You can watch this podcast. Those are all things that you can do personally for yourself to improve as a photographer, to gain that knowledge of research based on what you defined it is that you like doing as a photographer. And again, this can be a lot of things. That definition can be a lot of things. And I think the research could entail a lot of things. The second part to this research, though, is feedback from other people. And this is really important. If you don't, well, the first obvious thing that you could do is just, if you have friends that are photographers, hang out and have a designated photography night. Go shoot something. Go get coffee and talk photography. Do something where you can start getting feedback and bouncing ideas off of somebody else. Get somebody else to look at your work from time to time. Just, get a second opinion, see what you think. If you don't really know anybody who's serious as a photographer, I think it's important, you could look at a local community college and just take a class. I've done this myself before, and the last time I did it was probably about 10 years ago. And I took a class and it was on darkroom printing, and to be honest, it wasn't a subject that I needed to learn anything on, but I needed access to a darkroom at that time, which I didn't have. And I also wanted that group feeling, and it ended up being a really good class because there was only about 5 or 6 of us in there. And we all did a show at a coffee shop at the end of the deal. But it was a social event that I think that one class that I took, and it wasn't that I learned it from this educational academic perspective, but the things I learned out of it, just being around other people that were into shooting as well, was invaluable to me. And I think it was singly one of the most, it was one of the deepest photography education experiences I've had, even though it wasn't necessarily educational on the level you think it might be. But anyway, that aside, that's another reason to take classes, get access to things you don't have, like a dark room, or if you don't have a computer that has, photo editing software or something like that. That's a really good way you can gain access to those things. And you get that interaction with other people. And when you're taking a class, usually part of the deal is you're going to review each other's work as peers. And so that's very important too. So that's the research side of this. Then there is the practice side. And the practice is very important. And I mentioned the 10,000 hour rule earlier, and I'm not going to go too into this because I'm not sure that I totally buy into the idea, but it was a book that came out a couple years ago that basically saying if you want to get good at anything, you have to have 10,000 hours under your belt to become better at it. Well, and it was a really popular kind of ideal at the time. This is probably about 5 or 6 years ago. But not sure it really holds up, because inevitably, if you're going to get real serious about something, you're going to put that kind of time into it. So that's just part of the deal. And maybe the whole point of that 10,000 hour thing is to try to encourage people to not get frustrated and quit when they've only done something a short amount of time. So we do know that it takes hours to do, but don't think of it in terms of benchmarking hours. I think it's ridiculous. What I would think of it in terms of is go out and shoot. Again, remember that definition. What have you defined? What have you been researching? And now you got to put that into practice. So if you are into street photography, you need to get out and shoot street photos. If you're into landscapes, book some trips, start traveling, and start shooting some landscapes. If you're into people, just grab coworkers at lunch and go shoot portraits. Try to find creative ways to do that. All these things are end up being practice, and you're going to get images out of this that are really good, that belong in your portfolio, images you want to make and sell prints of. And this starts defining you as a photographer. This starts defining your work. And especially if you're serious about it and you're going to put some time into it and try really hard at it. Now, the last component of this whole thing, and I think this is arguably the most important of the whole thing, is evaluation. And it's one thing, and I think this is where people fall short, is because they don't really do enough research or definition. They do a lot of practice. I don't think that's a problem with people. And then the evaluation gets skipped entirely. I'm a big believer, and I was always brought up, with this analytical style of thinking, in that, to get answers and to benchmark success, you're going to have to be analytically thinking, and you're going to have to evaluate what it is that you're doing. Now, about a year ago, we did an episode on this, and I will link this up in the show notes, and I encourage you to go watch it again, because I think it's very important, and it holds up. And I was talking about metrics for success for photography. And if you look at metrics and you look at questions that you ask yourself as a photographer that are a little bit hard-hitting, but you start to try to get deep with those questions. And go watch the episode. I've got the show notes. All the questions I suggested are listed out. Take that list and then tear it apart and bend it to suit what it is that you were interested in doing as a photographer. You can keep some of them, come up with some new ones. And these are things to ask yourself important questions to determine if you're succeeding in these other areas or not. So, some of the deeper questions were, how many photographs have I made in the last month that I feel are of the level to be included in an exhibition if I had one. So if I was going to do a show, how many things have I shot in the last month would I include in that show? It's a tough question. It's a better question than how many photos did I make this month, because that's easy. I can go grab a camera and go shoot 10,000 photos today, just holding the shutter down and shooting everything. But that's just random shooting. That's not quality. So what you're looking for when you're asking these evaluative types of questions is you want answers that you can get back in terms of what the quality that you're going after is, and qualitative information. And so that's really, really important, because that's the only way you're going to start to get real with yourself on if you're improving. A lot of times I think this is a productivity issue. And this is photography, this is design, this is art, this is illustration, this is painting, this is anything that's creative, this is writing, this is, if you're really going to get better at something, it's important to work at it, research it, learn as much as possible, but also this definition, or this evaluation aspect of it is so important, because it's the only way you're going to get serious with yourself and benchmark it. A lot of times we spin our wheels, and that's just human nature. I do it. I've done it with this show, where you fall into a rut of talking about the same things a lot, and you need to turn it around and really take a hard look at what you're doing, and am I on target with what it is that I set out to do? And if I'm not, how do I get there? And that's the important thing. And that is when you're going to start seeing results. results, folks. And it's hard. I won't lie. It's very difficult. I'm bad at it. I have to work very hard at it. Sometimes I fall off the wagon and I don't sit down and have quiet time once a month, every month, and evaluate myself. But I try to do it when I'm thinking about it, which maybe it's every 3 months. And then I get back on a once a month cycle, something like that. But it's really important to start evaluating your work on a very objective level, not a subjective. Not a, wow, this is a cool photo I made this month. You know, it's a cool photo, but is it what I'm setting out to do? Is it a cool photo? Can I see any improvement over this photo from previous stuff? And you're going to know when these answers are correct and when they're accurate, and the answer is yes. Okay, so I hope this has helped you a little bit, and I hope you can take some of the stuff we've talked about, some of these questions, and really kind of these 4 stages of what it takes, 5 stages of what it takes to improve as a photographer. And, you know, list them out and take some quiet time and kind of evaluate where you are, and maybe come up with some ideas that are going to push you to that next level. And like I said, I made reference to episode 87, which I, again, will link to in the show notes. And I think this is really important. And like I said in that episode, I think it's important about once a month or so, maybe every 2 weeks, but at least once a month, to take some time, take some quiet time, evaluate your work, evaluate what you're doing, and kind of try to tweak things to move forward in a different direction. You don't have to radically change things up. Remember, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's a lifelong pursuit is what photography is. And so hopefully some of these things can make better use of your time and help push you along in a little more efficient manner. And you can start to see some results in your own work. So anyway, once again, guys, this has been The Art of Photography, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.